Hello, my name is Samuel Bosch. I'm a PhD candidate at MIT, founder of a successful startup and former national champion in triathlon. 13 years ago, I would have never imagined saying this sentence. So, I'm going to tell you my life story, and I'm going to tell you what my founding principles are. I hope not just that you will understand how I got to where I am right now, but I hope that you will start thinking about where you want to go and how you want to get there. Now, let's go back some 27 years. I was born in Germany, in Bavaria, in a small town that you've probably never heard of. My dad was a landscape gardener and hobby musician, and my mom had just finished working for different restaurants and hotels in Switzerland and France. According to my parents, I was a super hyperactive kid, always needing to do something at any given moment. By the age of 5, they made a huge decision. They decided to leave their small, perfect little village in Germany in order to relocate to Croatia and start working for a small NGO. Nowadays, when you hear Croatia, you might be thinking about all the beautiful and sunny beaches. But trust me, back then it was a chaotic and xenophobic country recovering from a civil war and the collapse of Yugoslavia. Also, I lived far away from all of the sunny beaches. Knowing barely any Croatian language, I was thrown into a local public elementary school as my parents just didn't have the money to pay for a private international school. 6 years old me just didn't have the vocabulary at that time to express that I really felt as an outsider and really struggled finding my place there. Throughout the next few years, school was definitely not a place where I felt happy or challenged. I was constantly mobbed for being the only foreigner in the entire school, even by some teachers who clearly hated me for it. In middle school, I developed huge behavioral issues. By the way, Mom, if you're watching this, please skip the next 20 seconds. My behavioral issues ranged from throwing stuff at teachers all the way to cutting one teacher's to cutting one teacher's hair and even blowing up several windows in my high school at night with little self-made explosives. Okay, not these explosives. These were actual bombs from the war. It's almost a miracle that I still have all 10 of my fingers. Not surprisingly, I was asked to leave the first school, and the second school, and the third school, and the headmaster of the fourth school also wanted to kick me out, but luckily she couldn't do so because I was diagnosed with ADHD, and therefore I had an excuse for being a horrible child. I even had my little gang of mildly put, not very ambitious friends, and we were all just encouraging each other constantly to do stupid stuff. You know, there is a saying that you kind of become the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. Well, back then, that average was really low. Looking back, most of these fights with teachers were either because I was bored or because they asked me to do something stupid that didn't make any logical sense. And trust me, back then, nothing made any logical sense. Everything was just based on pure memorization, even sciences. And they were just doing things the way they had always done them, without ever asking themselves, why? I just outright refused to do things that I found illogical. In a different educational system, they would have probably realized that I have quite a lot of potential and that I'm a really creative thinker. By the end of 8th grade, it was time to apply for high school. In Croatia, these applications are extremely competitive because there exists a clear distinction between good and bad high schools. One high school in the capital was, and still is, especially famous. With some combination of luck, last-moment effort and help from my parents, I somehow got admitted to this high school. Somehow, every single parameter was stuck in my favor, even though I was clearly not good enough for this high school. If just one out of the 100 parameters that determined who gets admitted to the high school had been any different, I would not have gotten admitted. Anyways, here I was all of a sudden surrounded by Croatia's smartest kids, and, not surprisingly, I performed the worst in my entire class in the first semester. One thing that particularly stood out to me were all of these smart kids who won national mathematics and informatics competitions in middle school. As a result, they got admitted to my high school. By pure coincidence, I got randomly assigned to the same class as them. One of them, who is now my good friend Dominic, even appeared recently in my podcast. I always looked up to them and admired them for being so intelligent. But at the same time, I thought that I was just not intelligent enough to ever compete with them. The way competitions work in Croatia is for almost every subject there exists a school competition, followed by a regional competition, state competition and a national competition. And from there you can maybe qualify to an international Olympiad. I felt kind of embarrassed to compete in math and informatics because the others were just so far ahead of me. But physics had just started in high school, so I thought I at least had a shot at qualifying for a state competition if I worked really hard. In the first semester I got the equivalent of a C in physics, which wasn't exactly encouraging. But at the same time, I got super inspired by classical mechanics and by kinematics and started to solve problems for many hours every single day. Instead of going the usual route of first learning about the problems and then knowing how to solve them, I tried to logically conclude how to solve them without ever having read anything in books about them. As I started to do physics for many hours every single day, something in my mind started to change. Instead of focusing my energy on causing trouble all day, I started looking at physics and the beauty of the most fundamental laws of nature. And this also brings us to the first out of 3 principles for becoming successful. Find something that you're really passionate about. I was so passionate about physics that it was the default thing my brain was thinking about. I didn't have to schedule my life in a way that I would find free time to do physics. On the contrary, my entire life was scheduled around physics because I was so excited about it. I know it may be very hard for you to find something that you're that passionate about, but try nevertheless. And even if you don't manage to find something that you're that excited about, the next piece of advice might help as well. A few months later, to my great surprise, I qualified for the state competition in physics. And then, 2 months of day-night work later, I qualified and won the national competition in physics. It was at this precise moment that I realized that maybe I wasn't so much less intelligent than all these genius kids. In fact, I realized that the secret to their success may not have been their IQ, but it was just a combination of really good teachers in middle school and very supportive parents who got them inspired to work very hard. And as a result, they became truly excellent. The difference between having an average IQ and having a very high IQ is at most having to put in a few extra hours of work here and there. It's not even nearly as important as people think. Back to my story. By the age of 15, I finished the first year of high school. I was still very passionate about physics, but something else started to happen in my mind. For the first time in my life, I had tasted what success feels like. No, I felt what success tastes like. That's how I should have said it. And all of a sudden, I started to dream big. Before that, I thought that my life's best case scenario is that I get an average job, make enough money to live, maybe have a family, and that's it. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with being average. But suddenly I realized for the first time in my life that I had a real chance of doing something big. Whether this means winning a Nobel Prize or becoming president, the point is that until that very moment, I believed that this was a world reserved exclusively for someone else. Someone that I could never become. And all of a sudden, I saw this opportunity to climb the social ladder and get into a position in society in which I could create the most impact. In the next 2 years, I started working my ass off. I qualified for the International Physics Olympiad and won a medal as the youngest contestant from my country ever. In order to balance my life a little bit, I started doing triathlon. First as a hobby, but then I started being very competitive about it. By the age of 18, I won the national championship in triathlon for the first time. The second life principle here is if you want to become really successful in something in your professional life, you have to become a complete fanatic about it. Staying average needs to become your biggest fear and enemy. Your friends and family will think you're insane. And they'll probably be right about this. You cannot really choose your family, but you can choose your friends. So make sure to surround yourself with the right people so they maximally encourage you and support you on your insane journey towards success. Having said all of this, I do have to emphasize that this is not a video about finding the key to happiness. You will have to work so hard that you will definitely pay a hefty price for success. If your only objective is maximizing the happiness in your life, this method may be a bit too extreme for you. But if your life goal is making a big difference for yourself and hopefully also for others, this is a battle you will have to fight. Back to 17-year-old me. Just before I started my last year of high school, I heard about MIT for the very first time. MIT was, and still is, the #1 university in the world for science and technology. I felt that MIT was the only place on earth that could satisfy my high ambitions. I read everything I could online about the MIT admission process and decided that I would do anything to get admitted. And I mean anything. And this was the point where I crossed the line between just being very ambitious and being just plain insane. I had no plan B. For me, the entire world became black and white. Either I get admitted to MIT and succeed, or I'm a failure. If cutting off my own finger would have meant I get admitted to MIT, I would have probably done it. Seriously. I had already done everything I could for the Physics Olympiad. Sadly, when I went for the second time, there was a translation error and I couldn't solve an entire problem and only won a bronze medal again. 2 months before the application deadline, I found out that MIT sometimes sponsors student athletes. I reached out to an MIT coach who gave me specific times and requirements in order to gain his support. I started training like crazy in order to satisfy these requirements. I pushed myself through unbearable levels of pain and ended up injuring both of my knees really badly. And a few months later, I got rejected from MIT. And there I was, in a lot of physical pain, disappointed and unable to pay for physical therapy to heal my knees. With no plan B and insufficient money to start studying at another good university, my only option was to start my bachelor's degree at the local University of Zagreb. I wasn't very sad for a long time though, because all of my crazy efforts resulted in excellent final exams. I was all over Croatian news for several days as the best high school graduate in the entire country. If you're curious about the study methods that I used to accomplish all of this, let me know in the comment section down below if you want me to make a video about all of the study methods that I used. In the first few months of my undergraduate studies, I read the autobiography of Sir Richard Branson. For those who don't know, he's a British billionaire and entrepreneur. He founded companies such as Virgin Record Label, Virgin Atlantic Airways, and Virgin Galactic. Also, he broke many world records, including being the very first person to cross the entire Pacific Ocean in a hot air balloon. His autobiography, which is, ironically, called Losing My Virginity, he explains that he lives according to one life principle. You've got to try everything in life at least once. And this is probably the most important principle that completely changed my life in the last 8 years. Instead of just focusing on physics and sports, I decided to grab every single opportunity that life would offer me. I started a debate and philosophy club because I wanted to learn more about the meaning of life and get better rhetoric skills. I started teaching coding at an orphanage in Kenya because I really wanted to help the children there. At some point, a friend of mine told me about this hedge fund that pays huge amounts for internships, so I just went ahead and applied. I went to Denmark to work on climate research. I went to Singapore and to California to work on research in quantum computing and artificial intelligence. And when a friend of mine approached me and asked me if I wanted to start a company, even though I was completely broke at the time and couldn't afford to take any financial risk, I just said, screw it, let's do it. And we started Assisto, a company which nowadays has over 20 full-time employees. Coincidentally, Screw It, Let's Do It is actually another book by Sir Richard Branson. A while after my viral appearance on Niklas Steenfeld's podcast, I decided that I hadn't done anything crazy for almost a year. Therefore, I came up with the idea of starting my own YouTube channel. I'm not very comfortable standing in front of a camera, nor do I have the right personality to really entertain people. But that's just what makes it more challenging. So I said, screw it, let's do it. If you're curious about how I had time to do all these crazy things, just let me know in the comment section down below if you would like me to make a video about productivity and optimizing your time. People kept telling me that all of these things were just a major distraction from my career path. And in some way they were right. I'm almost certainly not going to follow the linear path of becoming a university professor. But you know what? That's totally fine. Anyways, a few years prior to starting at Harvard and MIT, I kind of got tired of my studies in Croatia because I didn't really feel like it allows me to develop my full potential. Therefore, I quit my undergraduate studies, started working with no clear plan, and after some time I started going around from university to university asking if they would admit me to their master's degree programs. The only university that I could convince to admit me was EPFL in Switzerland, and it turns out for the very first time in the history of their university did they allow someone with just a high school diploma to enter a master's degree. They even gave me a full scholarship that paid me to study there. EPFL opened so many doors for me. At the end, I ended up doing my master thesis at Harvard University, and I got admitted around the same time for a PhD program at MIT. A real dream come true. This brings us to present day. I'm still a PhD candidate at MIT, just as every person. I'm struggling with a million things happening at the same time, and I'm constantly looking for new challenges. So to recap, here are the 3 most key principles for life for professional success. The first principle is you should find something that you're truly passionate about it. Because if you're excited about what you do not have to constantly force yourself to focus and work on that. The second life principle is if you want to accomplish something huge, you have to become completely obsessed with it. Staying average needs to become your biggest fear and enemy. And the third life principle is try everything at least once in your life. Don't be afraid of going outside of your comfort zone. If an opportunity comes and knocks on your door, just say screw it, let's do it. Now I want a little community engagement at this point. Pause the video and think about one thing and write it in the comment section down below that you would like to do in the next 12 months. It can be anything, as long as it's something that's either gonna challenge you or get you outside of your comfort zone. So go ahead and hit pause. I set a reminder on my phone to check every single comment 1 year from now and ask every single one of you for updates. So in the meantime, here are a few challenges that I set for myself for the next 1 or 2 years. Challenge number 1, I want to participate in a real bodybuilding competition for the first time in my life. Challenge number 2, I want to hit at least 100,000 subscribers of this channel. By the way, you can help me by hitting the subscribe button in the corner down here or there or wherever it is. Challenge number 2, I want to start a new company with my friends and colleagues at MIT. And challenge number 4, what is challenge number 4 again? Oh yeah, I want to publish my first paper in quantum machine learning at MIT. If you want to know more specifics about my PhD research, or you're just curious what I do on a day-to-day basis, you can click over here or over here. And if you want to get admitted to MIT, you can click over here. And with that, I would like to thank you guys so much for supporting me on this crazy YouTube journey. I cannot believe how fast this channel is growing. I do my absolute best to answer every single comment and Instagram message that I get. Thank you so much, take care, and goodbye.